I'd like to call our Board of Legislators meeting for April 26th to order and ask if Legislator Jan Burdick would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Join me in prayer. Father, Lord, thank you for this day, Lord, this beautiful country, Lord. Be with this nation, Lord. Pray for it and our leaders. Keep us going in a safe way, Lord. Be with us today as we deal with the issues with Allegheny County, Lord. Give us wisdom, direction, Lord. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
I'd like to thank Legislator Bill Dibble for the invocation and Legislator Jan Burdick for starting us off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call.
Mr. Barnes. Present. Mrs. Burdick. Here. Mr. Crandall.
Here.
Mr. Curran.
Here.
Mr. Decker.
Here.
Mr. Dibble.
Here.
Mr. Fanton.
Here.
Mr. Graves.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Havey.
Here.
Mr. Healy.
Here.
Mrs. Hopkins.
Here.
Mr. Ricky.
Here.
Mrs. Root. Here. Mr. Stockin.
Here.
15 legislators present. You're provided a copy of the board meeting minutes of April 12th. At this time, we need a motion to approve those minutes.
Moved by Mr. Dibble, seconded by Mr. Graves. Discussion? All in favor of their adoption, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried, and those minutes are approved.
You are also provided a copy of the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of April 21st, and we need a motion to approve those minutes.
Moved by Mr. Decker, seconded by Mr. Fanton. Discussion? All in favor of their approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried, and those minutes are approved. Seems good to continue our privilege of the floor and be able to meet like this. A year ago, we weren't having these type of sessions, and sometimes I think we've taken them for granted, but certainly seems good to be back and have some folks with us in the chamber here. I would like to, at this time, invite Shannon Ozella to come forward and join me. Shannon is the victim's advocate here in Allegheny County, and we're going to talk about Sexual Awareness Month. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And everybody that ends up into a real bad pickle here in Allegheny County and is the victim of whatever type crime, Shannon quickly becomes their new best friend. And I would not take her job for anything, but those that have come to rely on her services and guidance and shoulder to cry on probably from time to time, wouldn't trade her for anything. So Shannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I do hear that a lot. I couldn't do your job. I wouldn't do your job. I don't want your job. I do hear that a lot. But so April 2021 marks the 20th anniversary of Sexual Assault Awareness Month. The first Awareness Month was in 2001, which brought this issue into public consciousness, and a national network of events and support groups that raise awareness and provide resources to survivors and those at risk. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network supports a network of over 1,000 rape crisis centers. That's in the United States. This year's theme, which is so ironic considering everything is now we're doing now online, and I had to read a sentencing from my home last week. online, and I looked like the mother that was getting their kids away, but it was my dog. So my dog Jack had his first debut in court last week. Thank God everybody had a sense of humor. But this year's theme is We Can Build Safe Online Spaces, which encourages all of us to be safe online and protect our children as well. Technology is what is saving us from a complete change in the way of life and a world of a raging pandemic that we're all real sick of. It keeps the educational process going, relieves the shortage of communication, hence your meeting, and helps us live life as fully as possible given the isolation and social distancing. The stay-at-home orders have led to an isolation and limited in-person interaction as well as support for those who need it. And the internet, as we all know, is a wonderful tool. We use it in our daily lives, in our jobs, education, social media, and has given many families more communication with loved ones when they can't see them in person, and has been much better than the traditional phone call. Just ask my children, who just keep saying, just text me, Mom. So, but they're adults. With the many benefits with the internet come many dangers. With most schools being taught virtually, children are online much more than before, if that's absolutely possible. 70% of students between the ages of 8 and 12 in the United States have said they have received online messages with photos or words that made them feel uncomfortable. And only 7% of that amount report making their parents or guardians aware of it. 1 in 12 children between the ages of 11 and 16 have admitted to exchanging messages with sexual content to other people online, while 1 in 25 admit to sending graphic photos and or videos of themselves. These are to strangers, by the way. And cyber criminals are very good at convincing mostly young teen girls, some boys as well, between the ages of 11 and 16 that they are their age. And some grown person trying to gain their trust. And I will tell you, as would any other law enforcement in here, that this happens in this county much more than many people would think. I've personally met with several young girls. The youngest one was 9, that was exchanging pictures and videos with what she thought was a 12-year-old boy, and it was a 57-year-old man from, I believe, Nevada. And thankfully, her parents found it, and I'm still shocked by that. But we've had lots, several, and then those become a federal case as well. We have a case that we're currently working with now where Homeland Security is involved. The same thing. It blows my mind still. The other thing that I found was astounding was there was one little girl who was 10 and was a victim of this. And what we found out was, even after she found out that this person she was talking to was a grown man he's not from Allegheny County, but he came here, she still went and met with him and was sexually assaulted. So that absolutely astounds me as well. And of course, then he went back to, I can't remember where he's from. But 36% of girls and 31% of boys between the ages of 8 and 14 have been involved in a cyberbullying incident. And that's got completely out of control. Suicide rates in teenagers are at 47% in 2020 from being a victim of cyberbullying. 16% of children in that age group admitted to considering suicide because of being the victim of cyberbullying. I'm sure that number is much higher. And I won't continue with the countless stats on this subject, but today more than ever, there needs to be more education, not just in our schools, but at home, and more parental controls on computers and iPhones in the home. I've spoke with children as young as 6, I'm not making this up, that have an iPhone. And I remember saying, your parents are much nicer than I was. My godson was so mad at me at 13 years old, I wouldn't buy him an iPhone. Like, no, you're 13. So there was a lot of fight about because he got a flip phone because he's 13. He's 17 now, and he's got an iPhone. But I would not allow that. But I'm not that child's parents. But it turned out to be a disaster. So thank you all again. I encourage you to talk to your children or other family members about this topic. I encourage them to tell if this is something that happened to them. Law enforcement and I plan on meeting with the schools when things go back to normal, whatever that looks like and whenever that will be, about getting in the schools and meeting with students and opening a dialogue to this topic. And I applaud all the educators and parents with children at home with online schooling. Oh my, I wouldn't. And my husband will tell you that this has been the only time that he's ever heard me say, I'm so glad our children are grown, because I can't imagine. So I applaud educators. I applaud parents or other guardians that have had to do this, because I know it's been a nightmare. Please know that I'm always here for any of you or anyone you know who may need someone to talk to. My door is always open, and we can all do our part. And I was going to leave you with some empowering quote, but the one I think of that my mother used to say when I was growing up, that just drove me crazy, caused me to do many of an eye roll. Not in front of her, by the way. I'm not that stupid. Although I'm sure to this day, I'm convinced she did have eyes in the back of her head, because I did get caught a couple times. However, but when I would say to my mom about anything, and I would say, I can't do that, she always replied with, well, Shani, can't never did anything. And now you all know my family nickname. But thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Shannon. Don't run away. I do have a proclamation, and you rattled off some statistics, and there are some in here as well. You mentioned that this came about in 2001, I believe, and I think it was 2009 or something that it actually...
President Obama was the first president to declare it, yes.
Yeah. But anyways, we have continued to have a proclamation and an annual awareness. But, and you'd think, you know, continually getting the word out there that things would improve. And although I still don't want your job, job security is there, I think, with the changing technology and all of the challenges that, that come along those lines. So this proclamation is Sexual Assault Awareness Month for April 2021. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual violence is widespread and impacts every person in this community. And whereas the goal is to raise public awareness about sexual violence and educate communities on how to prevent it. Rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment harm our community, and the statistics show 1 in 5 women and 1 in 67 men will be raped at some point in their lives. And whereas child sexual abuse prevention must be a priority to confront the reality that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls will experience sexual assault before the age of 18. And whereas on campus, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men are sexually assaulted during their time in college. And whereas the theme of this year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign is I Ask, the campaign champions the power of asking for consent, whether it be to hold someone's hand for permission or permission to share personal information with others, or if a partner is interested in sex. Consent is a clear, concrete example of what it takes to end sexual harassment, abuse, and assault. And whereas the goal of the campaign is to empower everyone to put consent into practice, I Ask is the statement by which individuals will demonstrate that asking for consent is a healthy, normal, and necessary part of everyday interactions. Now, therefore, I, Curtis W. Crandall, Chairman of the Allegheny County Board of Legislators, do hereby designate April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Allegheny County. I have a signed copy for you, Shannon, and thank you so much for all you do for our victims here in Allegheny County. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite our Undersheriff, Kevin Monroe, forward, and he's going to share with us a little bit about Correction Officers and Employee Week. And welcome. And I do have a proclamation for you as well before you skip out and back to work, but the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. On May 5th, 1984, President Ronald Reagan, the 40th President of the United States, delivered a proclamation designating the first week in May as National Correctional Officers Week to honor the work of correctional officers and correctional personnel nationwide. That day, the President and hopefully the nation began to recognize that corrections officers were no longer just guards, but trained professionals. Day in and day out, 24 hours a day, corrections officers across this nation are tasked with one of the most demanding jobs in society, keeping a watchful eye on thousands of people entrusted to their care. Theirs can be a thankless job, mostly out of the public eye, and greatly misunderstood. It's not an easy job. Those who choose this career must possess a great deal of patience, understanding of both the law and human nature, endure a vast amount of training to be effective, successful, and remain safe. Every day, housing unit officers may be taking on the role of authority figure, first responder, teacher, counselor, and possibly the one voice of reason that some incarcerated individuals have ever heard. I want to take the opportunity to let my staff know how much I appreciate them and thank them for all they do. In the past 10 years, I have come to truly understand the personal sacrifice and commitment that make each and every day working for our office and corrections professionals. I would ask that all our citizens take a moment to remember and say a prayer for those who made the ultimate sacrifice, serving the corrections and the families that left behind feeling their loss the most. And that's written by Sheriff Whitney.
Thank you. Speaking of another job I wouldn't take at all, those of us that have been down to our county jail and seen what goes on there and the characters that need to be dealt with, it certainly takes a special person to caretake after those in that facility. And that's what this is about, to recognize those correction officers and employees. Whereas correctional officers and employees in Allegheny County form a core element of public safety for our community. And whereas our correctional officers and employees provide security, supervision, treatment services, and reentry efforts for hundreds of individual cases in the course of a calendar year. And whereas in Allegheny County, professional correctional officers and employees serve a co-equal role with law enforcement, engaging in dangerous and potentially life-threatening situations every day of the week. And whereas residents of Allegheny County need to more fully recognize and understand the complex, dangerous, and challenging responsibilities carried out by every single staff member in the Allegheny County Jail and Public Safety Facility. And whereas every member of the Allegheny County Sheriff's Office staff accepts enormous personal and professional responsibility. Now, therefore, I, Curtis W. Crandall, Chairman of the Allegheny County Board of Legislators, do hereby proclaim the week of May 2nd through May 8th, 2021 as Corrections Officers and Employees Week here in Allegheny County. Under Sheriff, thank you so much for being here. And besides that proclamation, certainly pass our thanks and well wishes to our correctional officers and employees at the county jail.
Will do. Thanks.
On your desk is a copy of the May calendar. Are there going to be any changes? There is a Public Works tour scheduled for 10 a.m. on Wednesday, May 5th, and we also added a Committee of the Whole meeting at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, May 19th. Chairman Crandall, declared April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Allegheny County, and he also declared May 2nd through the 8th as Corrections Officers and Employees Week in Allegheny County.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We do have introduction of legislation today by Legislator David Decker.
I'd like to introduce local law intro number 2-2021, print number 1, authorizing 12 and 13-year-old licensed hunters to hunt deer with a firearm or crossbow during hunting season with the supervision of an adult licensed hunter.
Thank you, Legislator Decker. Resolutions?
Resolution intro number 11021. Resolution establishing Allegheny County as a Purple Heart County. This resolution is being offered by the Personnel Committee and has committee approval.
Motion is made by Legislator Havey and seconded by Legislator Harris. Is there discussion? We can voice vote this resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11121. Approval of grant application by the Department of Social Services for a Blue Fund grant to renovate Willits Avenue property for the Child Advocacy Center. This resolution is being offered by the Human Services and Ways and Means Committees and has both committees' approval.
Motion is made by Legislator Hopkins and seconded by Legislator Burdick. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11221, approval of grant application by the Probation Department to the United States Department of Justice's Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program to offset the purchase of 5 body armor vests. This resolution is being offered by the Public Safety and Ways and Means Committees and has both committees' approval.
Motion is made by Legislator Healy and seconded by Legislator Dibble. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris?
Yes.
15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11321, acceptance of insurance payment from Geico and appropriation of funds to risk retention accounts. This resolution is being offered by the Ways and Means Committee and has committee approval.
Motion is made by Legislator Stockin, seconded by Legislator Fanton. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11421. acceptance of insurance payment from Geico, and appropriation of funds to risk retention accounts. This resolution is being offered by the Ways and Means Committee and has committee approval.
Motion is made by legislator Stockin, seconded by legislator Fanton. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris?
Yes.
15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11521. Acceptance of insurance payment from Wesco Insurance Company and appropriation of funds to risk retention accounts. This resolution is being offered by the Ways and Means Committee and has committee approval.
Motion is made by legislator Stockin, seconded by legislator Fanton. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky? Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11621. Acceptance and appropriation of a donation from the Cattaraugus County, Western New York COVID-19 Community Response Fund for the Child Advocacy Center in the Department of Social Services. This resolution is being offered by the Human Services and Ways and Means Committees and has both committees' approval.
Motion is made by legislator Hopkins and seconded by legislator Burdick. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky? Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11721. Budget adjustments to fund the upgrade to the Public Safety Facilities Security System. This resolution is being offered by the Public Safety and Ways and Means Committees and has both committees' approval.
Motion is made by legislator Healy, seconded by legislator Dibble. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins? Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11821, reappropriation of unspent funds from the Unmet Needs Grant for the Office for the Aging. This resolution is being offered by the Human Services and Ways and Means Committees and has both committees' approval.
Motion is made by legislator Hopkins and seconded by legislator Burdick. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy? Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 11921. Approval of agreement between Allegheny County and Quadia Incorporated for a 12-month lease for a postage meter utilized at the Health Department WIC office in Wellsville. This resolution is being offered by the Human Services Committee and has committee approval.
Moved by Legislator Hopkins and seconded by Legislator Burdick. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy? Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 12021. Resolution setting date of public hearing on local law intro number 2 of 2021 entitled A Local Law Authorizing 12 and 13-year-old licensed hunters to hunt deer with a firearm or crossbow during hunting season with the supervision of an adult licensed hunter. This resolution is being offered by the Resource Management Committee and has committee approval. It was not pre-filed and it will require a 2/3 vote to consider from the floor.
Motion on the 2/3 made by Mr. Dibble, seconded by Mr. Healy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. On the resolution itself, motion is made by Legislator Decker and seconded by Legislator Graves. Discussion? This is setting the public, date for public hearing. Mr. Healy?
I'd just like to repeat that we received correspondence from the Allegheny County Sportsmen's Federation. Robert Jones, I believe their secretary from Angelica, New York, in support of this resolution and a public hearing required therefore. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? This is again to set the date of a public hearing. We can voice vote this resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 12121. Amending resolution number 285 of 20 to change the salaries of the second and third assistant county attorneys. This resolution is being offered by the Ways and Means Committee and has committee approval. It was not pre-filed and it will require a 2/3 vote to consider from the floor.
Motion on the 2/3 made by Legislator Ricky, seconded by Legislator Havey. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. On the resolution itself, motion is made by Legislator Stockin, seconded by Legislator Fanton. Discussion? Mr. Dibble? Your sound?
Do you have the salary for the first assistant?
The salary won't be impacted by this, but the salary for the first assistant is $85,000.
85, thank you.
Mr. Healy?
I understand this is going to result in a net savings to the county. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Here, yes.
Mr. Ricky? Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin? Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble? Mr. Fanton? Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 12221, creation of one full-time position of tax map technician trainee within the Real Property Tax Services Department. This resolution is being offered by the Personnel and Ways and Means Committees and has both committees' approval. It was not pre-filed and it will require a 2/3 vote to consider from the floor.
Motion on the 2/3 made by Legislator Stockin, seconded by Legislator Ricky. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. On the resolution itself, motion is made by Legislator Havey, seconded by Legislator Graves. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havey?
Yes.
Mr. Healy? Yes. Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Aye. Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton?
Yes.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed.
Resolution intro number 12321. Approval of proposal from Land Tech Security for Verkada security cameras and environmental sensors. Budget transfer from contingency to fund the balance of the upgrade to the county facilities security system. This resolution is being offered by the Ways and Means Committee and has committee approval. It was not pre-filed and it will require a 2/3 vote to consider from the floor.
Motion on the 2/3 made by Legislator Root, seconded by Legislator Havey. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. On the resolution itself, motion is made by Legislator Stockin, seconded by Legislator Fanton. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Legislator Graves?
I want everyone here to know that I'm in favor of having a well-trained, well-equipped security presence within the campus here, the facility. My problem is I have some concerns, some reservations about the resolution.
I apologize, Mr. Graves. I just turned your sound off. It was my fault.
I thought I was a little quieter than I was. Yeah, yeah.
I apologize.
It might have been due course.
Hope I didn't break your train of thought there.
No, I had it all wrote down.
Thank you.
My concern revolves around policy and procedure. I just think that this resolution should be tabled and those issues corrected before we proceed. This is $186,000 total physical impact. I think it's important to provide our staff with a secure environment, and I have to vote no today. Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Healy?
I appreciate Legislator Graves' concerns and his comments, but I think we've been working on this for quite an extended period of time, and I think we got members of the Sheriff's Department here, and I would like to ask the Undersheriff if he'd like to make a comment. I suppose you're suggesting we proceed with this resolution, is that correct?
Don't know anything about why it would stop.
Undersheriff, if I believe that this one microphone is on here, if you could share that. Thank you very much.
I don't have any idea why it should be stopped. I understand Carl might have I don't know what policy he's talking about. However, I think it's been investigated through both IT and the administrator's office and treasurer's to move forward. I don't have any reason for it to stop. I don't think the sheriff does either.
Thank you. And this is on recommendation of the county administrator that we proceed with this too, is that correct?
It is.
Okay. Well, it seems like it makes sense to me, and I'll be voting for it, and I hope most of the board will find their way to approve it also. More security is, and updating our security is moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Legislator Healy.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Graves?
one point of observation. The undersheriff and I have not had any discussion about my concerns whatsoever. Had he, I think he would side with me, but that's just because I've known him for years. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Mr. Harris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Undersheriff, while we have you up there, without diving into details, are there existing policies and procedures within the Sheriff's Department in regards to building security?
There are policy and procedures.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just, since my mic is hot, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the members of the Sheriff Department, Mr. Hooker and the IT Department, and the County Administrator for their hard work on this. It certainly seems to me as though they've done their due diligence, and I'm looking forward to voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Before we call the question, the clerk has pointed out that it looks like there is a misspelling of the company's name in the resolution itself. This is in the first line of that resolution. The title is VERDAKA, and I understand it should be VEKADA.
VER. KADA.
It's also in sentence 1 of the resolved as well.
Yeah, you can't count on my quick note.
I wasn't going to say that.
Sorry
Let
about
me
that.
make sure that I have this correct, though. It's VERKADA, correct? So if we could have a motion just to amend this resolution and correct that spelling made by Mr. Dibble, seconded by Mr. Curran. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And on the amended resolution, any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Havey,
Yes.
Mr. Healy,
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ricky,
Yes.
Mrs. Root,
Yes.
Mr. Stockin,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes, Mrs. Burdick,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Decker,
Yes.
Mr. Dibble,
Yes.
Mr. Fanton, Mr. Graves, Mr. Harris. 14 ayes, 1 no.
Resolution is passed. How would you like your audits?
Collectively and by totals, please.
Motion is made by Legislator Stockin to have them read collectively and by totals, seconded by Legislator Fanton. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
General government support, 63,570.53. Education, 53,410.35. Public safety, 1,022,225.07. Health, 38,774.38. Bus transportation, 84,459.45. Economic assistance and opportunity, 738,479.90. Culture and recreation, 154.97. Home and community services, 36,708.30. Employee benefits, 6,263.37. Payroll and general fund totaled $2,044,046.32. Payroll and taxes total $1,094,868.76. Capital fund totaled $139,047.80. Other funds totaled $498,912.68 for a grand total of $3,776,875.56.
Motion to pay the bills made by Legislator Root, seconded by Legislator Dibble. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Havy?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ricky?
Yes.
Mrs. Root?
Yes.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Mrs. Burdick?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Dibble?
Yes.
Mr. Fanton? Mr. Graves? Mr. Harris? 15 ayes.
Resolution is passed. Is there anything to come before the board before we adjourn? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, as it appears there's no further business to conduct, I move we adjourn.
Motion made by Legislator Graves, seconded by Legislator Curran to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.